Imagine this. Just one single piece of paper, an official government order, lands on someone's desk. And almost overnight, it sparks, well, a massive nationwide debate, protests everywhere, and fundamentally changes the lives of millions. That's exactly what happened on August 13, 1990, with India's Office Memorandum, OM number 360123190 or EST, SCT. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're not just looking back at history, we're going to really unpack, step by step, how major policy decisions like this one actually get made and implemented in India. And maybe even more importantly, how the disputes that, inevitably pop up from them are resolved within our democratic system.
Absolutely. And this understanding is, well, it's incredibly valuable. Whether you're preparing for academic exams like your Class 9 or 10 boards, or even competitive exams like UPSC, SSC, or state PSCs, it really helps cut through the complexity. It clarifies the practical side, how our democratic system actually functions day to day, how the theory turns into real governance.
That's a really great point. So to really get a grip on this, we'll focus on the three core political institutions, the ones that form the backbone of our government, the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. Let's start by sort of peeling back the layers on that specific office memorandum. So tell us, what exactly was this August 13, 1990 government order, and why did it become such a landmark decision?
Right. So this specific office memorandum, the OM, it announced a really significant policy change. It basically mandated that 27% of the vacancies in civil posts and services under the government of India would be reserved for the socially and educationally backward classes, or SEBCs. Now, you have to remember, before this, reservations were mainly for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. This order introduced a whole new category, SEBCs, expanding the scope of affirmative action quite a bit. And it's really crucial to understand this. The officer who actually signed the document, they were merely implementing instructions. They weren't the real decision maker behind this huge policy shift.
Okay, that's a powerful distinction. So if the signing officer wasn't the one calling the shots, it sounds like there's a whole backstory here. Can you maybe walk us through the full chain of events? How did this specific office memorandum actually come into being?
Certainly. This OM wasn't just pulled out of thin air. It was the endpoint of a pretty long journey, actually. It started way back in 1979. That's when the government of India appointed the Second Backward Classes Commission. You probably know it as the Mandal Commission, headed by B.P. Mandal. Its mandate was clear. Identify the SEBCs across India and recommend steps for their advancement. The commission submitted its report in 1980, and one of its key recommendations was exactly this: 27% job reservation for SEBCs in government employment. Now, for almost a decade, this report was talked about a lot. Discussed in Parliament, many MPs and parties were pushing for it. Then, fast forward to the 1989 Lok Sabha election, the Janata Dal, in their election manifesto, explicitly promised to implement the Mandal Commission report if they formed the government. And they did. They formed the government, and VP Singh became the prime minister. After that, the formal steps happened pretty quickly. First, the President of India, in his address to Parliament, announced the government intended to implement the recommendations. Then, on August 6, 1990, the Union Cabinet met and took a formal decision to go ahead with it. The very next day, August 7th, Prime Minister VP Singh officially informed both houses of Parliament about this decision. Finally, the Cabinet's decision went to the Department of Personnel and Training. Senior officers there drafted the actual order, got the necessary ministerial approval, and then an officer signed it on behalf of the Union government. And that's how OM No. 3600123190 was formally issued on August 13, 1990. Phew, quite a sequence.
Wow. Okay, so a very deliberate process. But once it was formalized, this decision really, as you said, ignited huge controversy, passionate debate across the whole country. Can you give us a balanced view? What were the core arguments, for and against this reservation policy? I think the source material even mentions it showing up on Amul butter hoardings. That really shows how pervasive it was.
That's exactly right. The debate was just everywhere. You couldn't escape it. And yes, those Amul butter hoardings are a great example. It really shows how deeply this policy touched, almost every household. Sparked debates at dinner tables across India during 1991. So to look at both sides fairly, the arguments for the policy, they really centered on tackling existing historical inequalities. Proponents felt it would provide, genuinely fair opportunities for communities that had been historically underrepresented in government jobs, help level the playing field, essentially. On the other hand, the arguments against the policy focused heavily on the principle of equality of opportunity for everyone. Opponents felt it might unfairly deny jobs to others, even if they were, quote-unquote, more qualified based just on merit. Some also worried it could actually perpetuate caste feelings rather than reduce them, and maybe even hamper national unity by creating these divisions. Our goal here, of course, is just to understand the process and the reactions it triggered, not to take a side on the policy itself, but to see how profoundly it shook up public discussion.
Understood. So, with such strong disagreements really tearing the country apart in some ways, how was this huge policy dispute finally resolved? How does our democratic framework handle something like this?
Right. And this is exactly where the judiciary comes into the picture. The people and groups who are affected or opposed to the order, they filed numerous cases in the courts, challenging its validity, basically. The Supreme Court of India, being the highest court, took all these different cases and bundled them together into what became famously known as the Indira Sami and others vs. Union of India case. A large bench, 11 judges of the Supreme Court, heard arguments from all sides. This went on for months. Then in November 1992, by a majority decision, the Supreme Court judges declared that the Government of India's order, the OM, was indeed constitutionally valid. But, and this is key, at the same time, the court also gave a crucial direction. It told the government to modify the original order, specifically to exclude the well-to-do persons, what we commonly call the creamy layer, from getting the reservation benefit. The idea was to make sure the benefits actually reached those who truly needed them most within the SEBCs. So following that verdict, the Department of Personnel and Training issued another office memorandum on September 8, 1993. And that really brought this long dispute to a formal close. It established the policy pretty much as it's been followed ever since.
That Mandel Commission example, it really does show clearly that governing a country isn't just about one person making decisions or signing papers. The scale is immense. So why exactly do we need these complex institutions in a democracy? With all their rules and procedures, which, let's be honest, can sometimes seem slow or bureaucratic.
That's a really excellent observation. A modern government has just, well, vast and incredibly varied responsibilities. Think about it. Ensuring national security, providing education, healthcare, collecting taxes, managing defense forces, running countless welfare programs. It's just impossible for one person or even a small group to handle all of that effectively. You absolutely need different people, different bodies focused on different tasks. Some make decisions, others implement them, and crucially, others resolve the disputes that always come up. Institutions are basically those established arrangements, the rules and procedures that ensure things keep running. They provide continuity, accountability, and a degree of fairness, no matter who's in charge at any particular moment. Now, you're right. Institutions can sometimes seem frustrating. They have rules, meetings, paperwork, which can lead to delays or feel complicated. But these perceived drawbacks are actually vital for democracy, that very slowness or complexity we sometimes complain about. It acts like a built-in safety mechanism. It prevents rash decisions. It ensures that major changes, like the Mandel policy, are debated, challenged, refined, not just decreed overnight. It forces wider consultation. It makes it harder to rush through bad decisions. And fundamentally, it safeguards democratic principles. The Mandel case is a perfect illustration. You saw the Prime Minister and Cabinet making the initial decision, civil servants drafting and implementing, and the Supreme Court reviewing and modifying. All these institutions working together, sometimes over years, to arrive at a final, well-considered policy.
So the process, even the sometimes frustrating parts, is actually part of the strength. That makes sense. Let's focus now on one of these core institutions, Parliament. What is the fundamental role of Parliament in India's democracy? Why is it considered so central to how we're governed?
Parliament, in the Indian context, is the National Assembly of elected representatives. It's the body that exercises supreme political authority on behalf of the people. At the state level, you have similar bodies, usually called the legislature or legislative assembly. Parliament's functions are absolutely foundational. First, and perhaps foremost, it's the final authority for making laws. This job, legislation, is so central that these bodies are often just called legislatures. They can make new laws, change old ones, even get rid of existing laws entirely. Second, Parliament exercises direct and full control over the government, the executive. The government can only stay in power and function effectively if it has the support, the confidence of Parliament, specifically the Lok Sabha. Third, Parliament controls the public purse. All the money the government spends, it has to be sanctioned by Parliament. No expenditure can happen without its approval. And finally, Parliament is the highest forum we have for discussion and debate. On public issues, on national policy, it's where the government can be questioned and where information can be sought on any matter of public concern.
Okay, now our parliament is bicameral. It has two houses, the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha. How do these two houses differ in, say, their structure and how they function? And maybe more importantly, which one actually holds more power in practice?
Yes, India has a bicameral legislature. Officially, parliament includes the Council of States, which is the Rajya Sabha, and the House of the People, the Lok Sabha. And technically, the president is also part of parliament because laws only take effect after getting presidential assent. Now, the Lok Sabha members, they're directly elected by us, the people, usually for a 5-year term. And the Lok Sabha can be dissolved before its term ends, for instance, if the government loses its majority. The Rajya Sabha members, on the other hand, are elected indirectly, mainly by the elected members of the state legislative assemblies. And it's a permanent body. It never gets dissolved completely. Members have 6-year terms, with about 1/3 retiring every 2 years. Now, you often hear the Rajya Sabha called the upper chamber and Lok Sabha the lower chamber, but that terminology can be a bit misleading in terms of power. Despite the names, on most important matters, the Lok Sabha actually exercises supreme power. Let's look at some specifics. Take ordinary laws, non-money bills, both houses have to pass them. But what if there's a disagreement, a deadlock?
Well, a joint session of both houses can be called to resolve it. But because the Lok Sabha has a much larger number of members, its view is almost certain to prevail in a joint sitting. Now, when it comes to money matters, the budget, finance bills, the Lok Sabha's power is overwhelming. The Rajya Sabha literally cannot reject money bills. It can only delay them for a maximum of 14 days or suggest changes. But the Lok Sabha is free to accept or reject those suggestions. That 14-day limit isn't random. It's designed to ensure the people's directly elected house has the final say on finance. And perhaps most crucially, the Lok Sabha controls the Council of Ministers, the government itself. The Prime Minister and the entire Council of Ministers are collectively responsible to the Lok Sabha. If the Lok Sabha passes a vote of no confidence in the government, the Prime Minister and all other ministers have to resign. The Rajya Sabha simply does not have this power. And if you were to say, look at the proceedings of the Lok Sabha on a random day, like the example from December 7, 2004, in the source material, you'd see this dynamism. You'd see question hour where ministers answer questions.
You'd see papers being laid, maybe a discussion on the Securities Laws Amendment Bill, or a debate on foreign policy concerning Iraq. It's not just abstract lawmaking, it's active governance and accountability in real time.
All right, so Parliament crafts the laws. A huge task. But a law sitting on paper doesn't really do anything until it's put into action, does it? Who are the people who take these big legislative decisions and actually make them work on the ground across the country? That's where the executive comes in, I suppose. So who exactly makes up the executive in our democracy, and what's their main job?
Precisely. The executive is that branch of government, that body of functionaries, responsible for the day-to-day execution or implementation of the laws and policies made by the legislature. When people talk about the government in everyday conversation, they're usually referring to the executive. In a democratic system like ours, we usually distinguish between 2 types of executive. First, you have the political executive. These are the leaders elected by the people for a specific term, usually 5 years. Think ministers, the prime minister. They are the ones who take the major policy decisions. Second, there's the permanent executive, often called the civil services or the bureaucracy. These are officials appointed on a long-term, often permanent basis, like IAS, IPS, IFS officers. They remain in office even when the ruling party changes. Their role is crucial. They assist the political executive in carrying out the day-to-day administration, provide expertise, and ensure continuity.
Okay, that distinction is clear. Political leaders making policy, permanent officials implementing. But here's a question that often comes up, especially for students trying to understand this. Why does an elected minister, who might not be a deep expert in, say, defense technology or agricultural science, hold more power? Why do they get to make the final call over a highly knowledgeable civil servant who spent their entire career in that field?
That's a fundamental question, and it goes right to the heart of democracy. The answer lies in democratic accountability. The minister is an elected representative. They are chosen by the people, and ultimately they are answerable to the people for all the consequences of the decisions made. The minister embodies the will of the people, expressed through elections. They are the ones who have to face the voters again. So while the civil servant, the expert, brings invaluable knowledge, technical details, different options for implementation, the minister provides the overall direction, the framework, the objectives, based on the public mandate they received. The minister certainly takes advice from experts. Often experts themselves might disagree or offer several possible paths. But the minister, having that broader view, considering public opinion, political feasibility, overall government goals, has to make the final decision. You could use an analogy. The experts can map out all the possible routes, detailing the pros and cons of each road. But it's the person responsible for the journey, with a view of the final destination and the passenger's needs, who decides which route to take. In our democracy, the elected minister plays that role.
That makes sense. The accountability factor is key. Now, within that political executive, the prime minister is usually seen as the most powerful figure. How is the prime minister actually appointed? And what are the specific powers they hold?
Right. The prime minister isn't directly elected to that post by the people. Instead, the president appoints the prime minister. But the president doesn't just pick anyone. By convention, the president appoints the leader of the party, or the coalition of parties, that commands a majority in the Lok Sabha. If no single party or pre-poll alliance has a clear majority, which happens quite often these days with coalition governments, the president uses their discretion. They appoint the person who, in their judgment, is most likely to be able to secure majority support in the Lok Sabha. The president might then ask that person to prove their majority on the floor of the House within a set time. And the PM's tenure isn't fixed either. They remain prime minister only as long as they command that majority support in the Lok Sabha. Once the PM is appointed, the president appoints the other ministers, but strictly on the advice of the prime minister. The PM essentially decides who will be in their Council of Ministers. This Council of Ministers is the official name for the body comprising all ministers. It's usually quite large, typically 60 to 80 ministers of different ranks. Within this council, the most important inner ring is the cabinet. This usually consists of about 25 or so top-level leaders, the senior ministers who are in charge of the major ministries. It's in the cabinet meetings, chaired by the PM, where most important government decisions are taken. That's why our system of parliamentary democracy is often called the cabinet form of government. Below the cabinet ministers, you have ministers of state with independent charge, handling smaller ministries, and ministers of state who are attached to and assist cabinet ministers. And a really important principle here is collective responsibility. This means that all ministers in the council must publicly stand by and defend every decision made by the cabinet, even if they personally disagreed during the internal discussions. If one minister disagrees strongly enough that they can't defend a decision, they are expected to resign. Now, the powers of the prime minister as head of the government are quite extensive. The PM chairs cabinet meetings, coordinates the work of all the different government departments. If there are disagreements between departments, the PM's decision is usually final. They exercise general supervision over all ministries. All ministers essentially work under the PM's leadership. The PM distributes and redistributes portfolios, the work among the ministers, and the PM also has the power to dismiss ministers. And crucially, think about this. If the prime minister resigns or quits, the entire ministry resigns. That shows how central the PM is. In recent decades, especially with the rise of strong party leadership and media focus, power has often become even more concentrated in the hands of the prime minister, so much so that some political scientists even call it a prime ministerial form of government rather than just cabinet form. We've certainly seen this trend in India, too. Think of powerful PMs like Jawaharlal Nehru or Indira Gandhi, who wielded immense authority. The source material even includes cartoons from those times, showing ministerial hopefuls crowded around the PM, or depicting Indira Gandhi's powerful cabinet, which visually reinforces this point about the PM's dominance. But there's a significant check on this, especially in recent times: coalition politics. A prime minister leading a coalition government simply cannot act with the same degree of unchecked authority. They have to accommodate different groups and factions, not just within their own party, but also among the alliance partners. They need to listen to their views, consult more widely, build consensus. The survival of the government often depends on keeping all coalition partners reasonably happy.
That's a really fascinating look at the PM's central, yet sometimes constrained position. Now, while the prime minister is the head of government, we also have the president, who is the head of state. What exactly is the president's role? How does it differ from the PM's active leadership?
Right, the president is the head of the state. But unlike the prime minister, the president's powers are primarily nominal or ceremonial. Think of it as similar to the role of the British monarch. The president isn't directly involved in day-to-day governance, but supervises the overall functioning of all political institutions. They ensure things operate in harmony and achieve the state's objectives. They are the ultimate guardian of the constitutional framework. The president isn't elected directly by the people either. They are elected indirectly by an electoral college consisting of the elected members of parliament, MPs, and the elected members of the state legislative assemblies, MLAs. This method ensures the president represents the entire nation, not just the majority party at the center. Now, if you just read the Constitution, the president seems incredibly powerful. All governmental activities happen in their name. All major laws and policy decisions are issued in their name. They make all the major appointments. The Chief Justice of India, other judges of the Supreme Court and High Courts, the governors of states, the election commissioners, ambassadors to other countries, all appointed in the president's name. All international treaties and agreements are made in the president's name. And the president is the supreme commander of India's defense forces. You often see pictures, for instance, of the president administering the oath of office to the prime minister, a very visible example of this formal constitutional role. However, and this is the absolutely crucial part to understand for how our system actually works, the president exercises almost all these powers only on the advice of the Council of Ministers, headed by the Prime Minister. The president can ask the Council of Ministers to reconsider its advice. But if the Council sends the same advice back again, the president is constitutionally bound to act according to that advice. Similarly, when a bill is passed by both houses of Parliament, it only becomes a law after the president gives assent. The president can delay this a bit or send the bill back to Parliament for reconsideration if it's not a money bill. But if Parliament passes the bill again, with or without changes, the president must sign it. So where does the president have real discretion? There's really only one significant situation: appointing the prime minister when no single party or coalition gets a clear majority after an election. In that kind of hung parliament scenario, the president has to use their judgment to appoint the person they think is most likely to be able to win the confidence of the Lok Sabha. They might ask that person to prove their majority within a specified time. This whole setup is very different from a presidential system, like in the United States, where the president is both head of state and head of government, is directly elected, and doesn't depend on the legislature's constant support in the same way. Understanding this distinction, nominal head versus real executive power, is key for your exams. It explains why, for example, the PM's view prevails on policy, or why the president's role as supreme commander is exercised based on government advice. It helps clarify those common questions, like the ones from Iliama, Anakuti, or Marimal mentioned in the text, about who really holds executive power.
That definitely clarifies a role that can sometimes seem confusing. Okay, so we've talked about laws being made by the legislature and laws being implemented by the executive. But what happens when things go wrong? What if a law or a government action seems unfair or violates someone's fundamental rights? Or what if there's a dispute between states or between the center and a state? That's where our third crucial pillar comes in: the judiciary. Why is an independent and powerful judiciary considered so absolutely essential for a democracy like India?
You've hit on a vital point. An independent and powerful judiciary is the cornerstone of the rule of law and the protector of citizens' rights in any democracy. Without it, rights and laws could become meaningless. The Indian judiciary comprises all the courts at different levels put together. It's an integrated system. At the top, you have the Supreme Court for the entire nation. Below it are the high courts in the states. And then under them, you have district courts and various local level courts. This integration means the Supreme Court controls the judicial administration throughout the country. Its decisions are binding on all other courts in India. The Supreme Court can handle a wide range of disputes: disputes between citizens and the government, disputes between two or more state governments, and disputes between the union government and state governments. Plus, it's the highest court of appeal in both civil and criminal cases. If you're not satisfied with a high court judgment, you can appeal to the Supreme Court, though it decides which cases to admit.
Okay, so it has broad authority. But how is its independence? Its ability to act without pressure from the government or anyone else actually ensured, especially when it comes to appointing and removing judges. And what makes the Indian judiciary so powerful compared to others globally?
Independence is key. It means judges aren't acting on the direction of the government or the ruling party. And India has, by and large, managed to establish and maintain this crucial separation. How? Look at appointments first. Formally, judges of the Supreme Court and High Courts are appointed by the President, acting on the advice of the Prime Minister and in consultation with the Chief Justice of India, CJI. But in practice, over time, a system has evolved where the senior judges of the Supreme Court itself play a very significant role in selecting and recommending new judges for both the Supreme Court and the High Courts. The appointment of the Chief Justice is also usually based on seniority. The senior-most judge of the Supreme Court is generally appointed as the CJI. This convention greatly minimizes the scope for political interference from the executive and judicial appointments, making our system quite robust in terms of independence compared to, say, the U.S. system, where appointments can be more politically charged. Now, what about removing judges? It is deliberately made extremely difficult. A judge of the Supreme Court or a high court can only be removed through a process called impeachment. This requires a motion supported by a special majority, a majority of the total membership of the House, and a majority of at least 2/3 of the members present and voting passed separately by both houses of Parliament. This process is so difficult, so stringent, that it has actually never been successfully completed in the history of democratic India. This security of tenure is a huge factor in ensuring judicial independence. And what makes it powerful? Well, the Indian judiciary is indeed considered one of the most powerful in the world. Why? Firstly, the Supreme Court and high courts have the power to interpret the Constitution. They decide what the Constitution means. This leads to the power of judicial review. The judiciary can examine the constitutionality of any law passed by the legislature or any action taken by the executive, whether at the union or state level. If it finds that a law or action violates the Constitution, it can declare it invalid, null, and void. The Supreme Court has even gone further and ruled that Parliament cannot change the basic structure or fundamental principles of the Constitution. This acts as a major check on Parliament's lawmaking power. Furthermore, the judiciary is the ultimate guardian of the fundamental rights guaranteed to citizens. Anyone whose rights are violated can directly approach the high courts or the Supreme Court for a remedy. And in recent years, the courts have become even more accessible through public interest litigation, PIL. This allows any individual or organization to approach the court if they believe an action by the government or a public official is harming the public interest. Courts use PILs to intervene against misuse of government power and to check malpractices. All of these powers, combined with its independence, contribute to the very high level of public confidence that the judiciary generally enjoys in India. You often see symbolic affirmations of its role, like the Chief Justice administering the oath of office to the President. It underscores the judiciary's foundational role as the ultimate interpreter and protector of the Constitution.
Wow. What a truly insightful deep dive into how India's democratic institutions actually work. We've really seen how the legislature makes the laws, the executive puts them into action, and the judiciary interacts with both resolving disputes and standing as the guardian of the Constitution. It's a remarkable complex system when you see it all together.
That's right. And understanding these institutions, how they function, how they interact, it's not just about doing well in your exams, though it's definitely crucial for that. It's really fundamental to being an informed, engaged citizen in our democracy. Each institution, despite maybe seeming slow or complicated sometimes, plays a vital and distinct role. Ensuring accountability, upholding the Constitution, protecting the rights of every single citizen. They are truly the bedrock of our functioning democracy. So we really encourage you, as you follow the news, as you observe current affairs, try to look at events through this lens. Think about which institutions are involved, how they are interacting. Reflect on how these structures, these processes, ensure the democratic functioning of our country day in and day out. Stay tuned for more exam-ready insights, and do subscribe so you never miss a topic breakdown.
In this deep dive, we covered the following topics: working of institutions in a democracy, how a major policy decision is taken, using the Mandel Commission case study, the need for political institutions, Parliament, its structure and powers, including Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, the political executive, focusing on the Prime Minister and Council of Ministers, the President, understanding their powers and role, and finally, the judiciary, its crucial independence and powers.